is Let Me Sum Up, your regular deep dive into recent reports on climate and energy. I'm Luke Menzel, recording today on Wurundjeri Land, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts. Global Vice President for Marketing and Extortion at the Let Me Sum Up podcast, Frankie Muskovich. Hello, Frankie.
Good evening, gents. Lovely to be with you on Gadigal country. I'm feeling a bit frazzled and like I am not in the mood to extort people, particularly tonight. I'm finding it. I know.
The kinder, gentler Frankie is going to reveal itself to our listeners tonight.
Whoa. Let's not get too carried away there. All I said was I wasn't looking to actively extort people, and the 30-second mark of this podcast. Give me a little time to warm up. We'll see where we get to.
Don't get too comfortable with your audience. The extortion is coming.
That's right.
Well, you can be comforted by the dulcet tones of the man that has recently refreshed his culinary love of the humble potato at the Great Trentham Spudfest. It is Tennant Reid. G'day, Tennant.
Well, hello. And yes, Spudfest, to which I was a first-time visitor, but definitely not a last-time visitor, saw apparently 15,000 intrepid Victorians converging on this lovely little country town, which the proprietor of the wildly overpriced but delightful antique shop that we visited did gently allow might have been slightly gentrified in recent times, given the intense proliferation of antique shops, artisanal chocolate shops, and French bakeries in it. But I acquired potatoes undreamt of at this festival. The Mayan twilight, the sapphire. I'm looking forward to cooking these with my new all-potato cookbook, the second all-potato cookbook of this pro-potato house.
In these troubled times, we can at least comfort ourselves with the fact that potato supply chains appear not to have been disrupted.
So far, they're good, but I'm keeping an eye on them.
On this week's show, we look at one of the key outputs of the first conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels, which was held in Santa Marta in Colombia last month. But first, the global energy crisis continues to confuse, with oil prices up, Australian petrol prices down, and attempts to reach a resolution to the Iran war going round in circles. Tennant, tell us what the hell is going on this week.
Well, I'm sick of this global energy crisis.
But are our listeners sick of us opening with it every single episode?
Well, I bet they are. But unfortunately, we just can't quit this global energy crisis because the protagonists, antagonists, will not step back. They will not admit that they have... nobody wants to admit anything around a weakening of their position. It really looks like Iran has just proved they have the capacity to severely disrupt the strait anytime they want to. The Americans continue not to officially accept that. As we record, the US has declared that sometime, I guess, in the next 12 to 18 hours, they will start guiding neutral vessels through the Straits of Hormuz. That sounds like an invitation to the Iranians to start blowing up ships, possibly the neutral ones, possibly the American ones. And indeed, not too many hours ago, a neutral vessel in the great waiting room of the Strait of Hormuz was struck by an unknown projectile. So it's all pretty febrile. And once again, you, dear listener, know more than we do about what just happened. But it is failing to end so far, and it has gone on long enough that it's just like ever more worser in technical terms for the global economy. So, as you said, Luke, Australian petrol prices have actually dipped a bit recently, quite a bit. Now, some of that was like a month ago now, the federal government's move to halve fuel excise, which was a big move and one that is a costly one for the budget to sustain. But there was more than that. And my colleagues and I at Australian Industry Group in my day job, our best combo of theories is we saw the lagged effect of some of the oil price declines that preceded more oil price rises, and oil prices are indeed well up above the $100 a US barrel mark now as we speak. The lagged effect of that on local fuel prices, but then also very significantly the topping out of the capacity of whatever you want to call them, hoarders, panic buyers, the well-prepared, the topping out of their capacity to actually stockpile more diesel and petrol for their own use, and a normalisation of demand for those fuels, plus some impact from the relatively mild fuel conservation and, hey, if you can take public transport, do take public transport encouragements that people have had. It does seem like those prices are probably going to go up again, or at least not see much more relief until some weeks into a global restoration of oil flows. But like that has been a bit weird, and it has felt less crisisy in the last couple of weeks within Australia than many people would have expected, possibly because things kept threatening to be okay in the Gulf. It kept seeming like a peace deal could be done, but the deal keeps not being done. I can add one more thing in a minute about our success in shoring up supply and how long that can go on for and the consequences of that. But what are your thoughts on the price movements?
Well, I mean, as far as that sort of potentially giving a false sense of security to people, like we're just in this kind of a bit of a weird moment, right? Like to your point there, Tennant, there's been some expectation that some kind of breakthrough was going to happen. And I think people have been like either, reserving judgment or failing to freak out more on the expectation that there'd be some sort of positive movement towards a resolution over the next, or the last couple of weeks. And I keep kind of thinking about what the implications are for the next few months here, given, pretty extreme measure you could argue with the government seeking to cut fuel excise. Remember, that was only a very short-term measure initially signed up to there in a 3-month reduction in the excise. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just like too much of a policy wonk. My immediate thought was, I wonder what that means for the continuation of that measure or not in the budget next week.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one. Like, what's your exit strategy from that?
Totally right, because you'd have to think they committed to it for a 3-month period, hoping by the time they'd need to make a decision around that, probably around firming up their numbers for the budget, they'd have a better sense of what was going to happen.
Interestingly, as we record, which is on Monday, the 4th of May, Jim Chalmers actually ruled out today an extension of the fuel excise cut. So new news for us, old news for all of you at home. But interesting that they feel like, despite the fact that many in the government no doubt view this as a potentially intractable situation that may go on for some time, they are not prepared to sign up for a long-term cost of living measure in this space, possibly because it's just so freaking expensive to do it.
Yes.
And it does, as you get, if it is a sustained crisis, it does have some perverse impacts in terms of that price signal being dulled as we work our way through the crisis.
Well, and you could very strongly argue the longer that support like that goes on, the stronger case there would have been for that money to be gear shifted into a more strategic kind of incentive with longer term impacts, either through, electrification, some of the other more demand side levers that we've been contemplating over various papers and ideas floated in the last little while. So, like, in the one hand, that's not necessarily surprising. It's probably also more revealing of what the budget kind of bottom line is likely to look like next week, which is, looking increasingly challenged in the absence of, where you might have expected potential sources of revenue to come through. Things like the gas export tax having been rolled out, that probably means a bunch of extra ideas that might have been floating around might not go ahead on that basis.
So changes of this sort can be hard for governments to get out of, and craggier members of the super Summerupperer community might remember the Howard government's suspension of the indexation of fuel excise in 2001, which in part responded to affordability concerns around both the lead up to the election that year and the impacts of the introduction of the GST and so-called double dipping GST impacts. That indexation was not reintroduced until 2014 by the Abbott government to try to shore up the budget a bit. So, 3 months of, look, we feel your pain, we're doing things for you, will be a comparatively cheap episode in the history of political fuel excise monkeying. But, yeah, the return of fuller price pressure on drivers will be pretty bumpy. At this stage, though, we do not, I think, look in Australia like we will experience a lot of absolute scarcity of supply of the charismatic liquid fuels, at least.
The charismatic mega fuels.
That's right. Who doesn't love them? A large-eyed diesel mascot.
You might get some dissent from our listener base.
Yeah.
Deezy.
Oh, God.
I'm just going to let you dig this hole, mate.
Yeah.
All right. There may well be problems of absolute scarcity within Australia in some specific supply chains for derivative products of various sorts. But at the moment, it looks like the combination of buying by the fuel supply sector of all available ships and cargoes of fuels from overseas, and both financial and diplomatic backing from the federal government to say, how wonderful it is to our various fuel suppliers who are also gas buyers, how wonderful it is for people to do the things that they promised to do.
Yay.
And implicitly how horrible it would be if they didn't.
Yay, contracts. Yay, trade.
Yep.
And I believe I expressed skepticism and the skepticism of others a couple of episodes back about whether this kind of implicit threat would actually be effective, because who would believe that we would do it? But it does seem to be working, and cargoes are continuing to make their way to Australia. The question that raises to me is, given that that does not really represent the world not being scarce, but the combination of the physical adjustment being borne by whoever can't afford to outbid the top 80% of petrol and diesel and oil buyers, including Australia, should we be actually a bit more keen to moderate consumption than we are, because we are kind of worsening the adjustment for others to the extent that we just go, we can carry on more or less as usual?
Well, it runs the risk of the reduction in fuel use that needs to be accommodated globally being not borne at all or hardly at all by richer nations, and borne in large part by countries, as you say, that aren't able to pay the premium to get the fuel to their shores. And so we're forcing that task onto those nations, which has some significant equity issues. It would be far better for all nations to kind of moderate their demand to the degree that was necessary to share that load. I kind of understand the dynamics of every nation wanting to secure those resources on behalf of their constituents, but it does result in a fairly perverse outcome in terms of equity, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is 100% an issue that, Australia should be conscious of when we're looking to relationships with our neighbours and key partners. I do wonder if the difference in storage between Australia and other countries puts a slightly different lens over that as well. Like, I think, the imperative for us to get onto that effectively earlier is stronger, because, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of sitting on much lengthier or larger reserves than some of those other countries, might be able to then draw more deeply down on, right? Which would also be, another, like, I guess other countries have a little more flexibility in how they might respond to that, I guess, need or request to make sure there is enough to go around to the people who need it, and not necessarily in a position to pay a premium for it. But, like, regardless, it does feel like sometime in the next, or who knows when exactly, or the time frame that'll be on. But what are the, I know we've got the national plan and all of that, but what do we seriously think the triggers then might be for Australia to take the next step and go to level 3 or stage 3 in that plan? What would be some early kind of indicators that we should be doing that?
I think the biggest thing would be the diminution of the stocks of supply that we have on shore, and as the government has been keen to emphasise, those numbers have gone up since the start of the crisis, even allowing for the extremely untimely fire at Viva. We're currently headed the other way. It is possible that we won't get to stage 3, even though the overall global situation gets worse and worse. There are a lot of countries drawing down their stocks, and that has certainly cushioned the amount of actual reduction in consumption so far. That can't go on forever for everyone. Although, like, China has an enormous stock of stockpiled oil, gas, petrol and diesel, and they have been, looking very well prepared for everything so far. The price movements are having an impact, though, and I guess even for those who boost their stocks, even for Australia, the high price of diesel and petrol and aviation fuel, which is starting to lead to significant reductions in the flights available to some destinations. We've seen a significant regional airline in the United States collapse last week, Spirit. The price movements are going to have an impact. We'll just see how big that is, and just how high prices do need to go to equalise post-stockpile demand.
What a great time to be talking about transitioning away from fossil fuels.
You would think so.
Indeed.
Shall we chat about a report?
We should.
Yeah.
The decision-making process under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the source of significant frustration. Indeed, many COP participants and observers believe the requirement for consensus results in the lowest common denominator agreements that fail to take on the challenge of dangerous climate change with the necessary urgency and ambition. Many see the failure to operationalise the COP28 commitment to transition away from fossil fuels as a prime example of this dysfunction. So much so that it drove the decision to convene a more informal forum focused on the issue, which was co-hosted by Colombia and the Netherlands in Santa Marta last month. The organisers of the first conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels describe it as a sustained political platform for countries ready to deliver implementation-driven action toward an orderly phase-out of fossil fuels. The plan is to make this an annual event, and this first edition convened a wide range of stakeholder groups, each of which focused on providing actionable advice on how countries can accelerate the transition to clean energy. We took a look at the summary report from the academic dialogue associated with the conference. Frankie, what did you make of it?
Well, I think this was a fascinating and I think keenly anticipated summit for the folks really plugged into the climate movement and a very live conversation about the need to transition away from fossil fuels, because this is the sort of first concrete step in a way out of last year's kind of high drama moment at COP30, where we saw, I think an increasingly strong divide between blocks of countries that really did want to see stronger language and kind of, a stronger emphasis on the phase out of fossil fuels, first introduced at COP28 at the Dubai COP, where the global stocktake first happened. But then last year kind of led to the rather sort of spectacular breakdown in the final plenary, where quite a lot of South American countries didn't agree to the final text. And one of the solutions, I guess, in moving things forward was that this dialogue that will be ongoing, I think the next one is next year in the Pacific.
In
Tuvalu. Got a proud history of fighting that fight at COPs. That this would happen now outside of the COP process and provide that platform and space for the block of about 80 countries or so, right? It's basically like a half-half game, if we were to be really reductionist about it, of countries that want to have the conversation about the things, the constructive focus things that need to happen for us to move further along this path. I think a lot of people had kind of quietly high expectations for it, but also given this is the first one of these, not exactly sure, what was going to happen. And, it's come at a particular moment in time, right? Like we are in the middle of a global fuel crisis, and there is an imperative to be thinking about proactive shifts, that countries can make. And so I was sort of very interested to read some of the outcomes of this summit. You saw quite a lot of different constituencies identified as contributors. Like there are 4, 8, 12, 15 summaries on the summit's website coming from, we looked more closely at the academic summary, but there are summaries from Indigenous peoples, children and youths like NGOs, the private sector, women and diversities as an interesting label there, and a few different other categories of folks, including subnational governments, both at the regional, state and then city level. This feels like a model that might be refined further over the next couple of these. And I found that like the academic summary super interesting, like lots of really good ideas. We can and should unpack those a little. The challenge in it, though, given there's not like a kind of clear, like it's not really meant to be some sort of consensus process necessarily, central call to action or kind of like what's the thing that comes out of this doesn't feel as clear, right? Except that this is important and stuff needs to happen. All the different constituencies have slightly different, understandably, emphases and things they want to see happen along those ways. So, like on the one hand, it feels like this is progress for a cohort of countries to start having that conversation, but it feels like we're a little on the training wheels, if you like. And, you know, there's just not that clarion call yet, because I think a summit like this that is happening outside of the COP process, which has a lot of protocols around it and processes sort of leading to that final decision text and like, you know, the key things that come out of it. We're just not there yet for this. So it's like the first step along the direction, and a lot of really sensible things coming out of the academic paper, but that was kind of my first blush response to the summit as a whole. What did you guys make of it?
Yeah, it's interesting sort of looking through the conference website, and there's a little explainer on what the conference is and it is not, and it's largely framed in relationship with the UNFCCC. Mm-hmm. So they're very keen to say it is complementary to the UNFCCC, sort of contributing while also kind of looking for opportunities outside of the UNFCCC process to accelerate practical delivery. Mm. But they're very clear they've got these dot points. It is not a replacement for the UNFCCC, a replacement for the COP30 presidency's roadmap, a negotiation space for a new fossil fuel treaty. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like they've actively created a space to hold conversations that are never going to go anywhere within the UNFCCC Conference of the Party process as it is currently constituted. Mm. But I think that's super valuable. Like, in some ways, the shagginess of all of this, the kind of like, you know, let 1,000 flowers bloom of all this is actually really healthy, acknowledging that this is the first step at this, and there's almost certainly going to be opportunities to improve the processes and sharpen up messages coming out of these events. But you kind of need a space to run ideas up the flagpole and find out which ones have some chance of building some momentum. And I think that the timing of this event is very deliberate, right? Around 6 months or so before COPs are traditionally held, ideas coming out of this event, you know, have time to gain some momentum. And if it does create a drumbeat, and there are ideas that are clearly gaining some momentum, there's an opportunity to feed them into those more formal processes where that is the goal. But there's also elements of this which is explicitly like not attempting to influence the formal process but look for areas where groups of countries can do things together, which is something we've talked about previously on the podcast in terms of the role of climate clubs and, you know, the collaboration that's possible between states outside of, you know, those big, bulky multilateral processes. This could be an incubator for smaller groups of nations coming together around a particular idea as well, because they find each other and realise that, hey, there's actually something that we can work on together here. So I think that there's things that one could critique about the shagginess, but it's also like acknowledging that the shagginess is kind of it's very beautiful as well. It's also part of my reaction to this. Yeah.
And just to like, I mean, I don't want to suggest that there wasn't like any structure to this conference. Like, there were 3 thematic pillars explored as a part of the summit. The first one goes to overcoming economic dependence. So looking at kind of fiscal dependence and public debt, looking at kind of shared responsibilities and joint efforts. Then you had a second pillar in transforming supply and demand, and that's been, like, I think we've had quite an ongoing focus and conversation on that aspect of this in our chats, looking at demand in terms of fuel switching, energy security and sovereignty, and energy access. And then on the supply side, planned phase down and closure of fossil fuel extraction and liabilities as well, and then looking at incentives, so switching the incentives away from fossil fuel use and extraction to clean energy and other forms of investment and things that hopefully will take their place. And then the third pillar, which kind of goes to the kind of multilateralism of it all, advancing international cooperation and climate diplomacy. So it does kind of highlight here, though, that they did explicitly want to talk about closing the gaps in implementation, governance and cooperation, including challenges of the UNFCCC process, as well as legal barriers, particularly, and this came through very strongly in the academic paper we read, those arising from investor-state dispute settlement, the ISDS, which is often kind of touted as a key issue. So there were these three thematic pillars, many of the contributions coming from the different groups at the end had recommendations and sort of key takeaways framed around those thematics. So it's certainly like conceivable and very plausible that you might see groupings of countries or kind of stakeholders start to coalesce around things that have been highlighted at this summit that might have gained some stronger support or more momentum. And you could see a push for some of those things at the COP process as a part of the an ongoing effort to see an advancement of that language as part of the official negotiations as well, right?
Yeah, and some ideas will have a very difficult time there. Some ideas had a very difficult time in this very event. So one that does get raised a lot by some of the states present and by many of the observer or stakeholder groups present is the idea of a fossil fuel supply treaty. And there was not a wide consensus in favour of that treaty expressed by the participants, the state participants, I should say, partly because a bunch of them are still fossil fuel producers and exporters. The fluffier, cuddlier ones, including Australia, pretty fluffy, but also Canada, also Norway, also Nigeria, and Colombia itself, whose president was keen to say they're the fifth biggest coal exporter in the world, and they feel they've opted to host and call for this summit, but they've felt the serious challenges to the steps, even the ones they've taken so far, on moving away from fossil export future with decisions not to grant new exploration or development licenses, for example. So with that group, it's a somewhat edited down group of participants. No Saudi Arabia, no Russia, no China, no India. Even with a somewhat edited participant list, it is not easy to agree everything. It does seem from the reports of the feeling in the corridors and in the rooms like there genuinely was much more ability than is often the case at COP to just actually talk and discuss things, or at least put things forward without endless procedural disputes. Although also there was a lot of everyone just putting forward their bit and not necessarily responding to or building on each other. And even some reports from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, who wonderfully document all these sorts of events, that ministers in rooms where civil society, Indigenous representatives were talking, and there was much more ability for that stakeholder input than is usual at the COP, where you get an opportunity to say a few words in the middle and at the end, and you're very rigorously gonged off if you go over your time. Ministers hearing this kind of intervention just didn't seem to know what to do with it. Not used to having this sort of on equal footing input from stakeholders in this sort of event. So it's all going to take a bit of time to get used to. The things that they did agree to go forward with, which, like, from the enormous efflorescence of ideas, I think these thoughts were probably locked in from before the conference started. They will have a second one, co-hosted by Ireland and Tuvalu in Tuvalu next year. They're going to complement, not replace, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change with a science policy panel for the global energy transition, which is going to get more into the tricky area of policy actionable recommendations for how to do transition. And they will have a great big stakeholder panel or more than one in turn. And then they've got some work streams on several big issues, roadmaps for transition, supported by the existing NDC partnership and the Global Energy Transition Panel. More on the macroeconomic dependencies and the financial architecture, which even people agree that those things are very important, even though they have wildly different prescriptions for how to change them. And that'll be supported by the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And the trade and investment balance for decarb is going to be supported by the OECD. Matthias Cormann at the heart of the transition away from fossil fuels, as he always has been, very secretly.
I always knew that a hero would rise, Ted.
Indeed. And there was one extra thing that they've got, which is everyone's going to be told about the COFIS methodology for tracking your fossil fuel subsidies, the Coalition on Fossil Fuel Subsidies. And this method, if it's the one that I've looked up, it's already out there. Everybody just could have been given the web link. It's not very revolutionary, but it would be helpful for there to be more commonality in the reporting of fossil fuel subsidies. The only other thing they agreed on was to try and generate FOMO and make more nations feel like they needed to be a part of the conversation next year, which they might succeed in.
With the COFIS piece, is that attached to a global kind of tally up of where the biggest subsidies come from? Because I guess, like, famously, right, the Australian government does not consider things like the diesel fuel tax credit a fossil fuel subsidy, even though many smart people can make a very strong case that it is and should be. So yeah, like is there a league table of best and worst actors in this space?
Not that I've seen from COFIS. What they have is a set of common minimum standards for national inventories of fossil fuel subsidies. And that involves, in the version that I'm looking at, and again, there may be much more work to be shared, they have to deal with the fact that there are several different definitions out there of fossil fuel subsidies. They do agree a definition of fossil fuels, but they don't have a single definition agreed of subsidies. And I think that particular dispute about Australia will continue to be in dispute. And the fact that in many tallies, certainly in the OECD's tally of fossil fuel subsidies, the biggest chunk of those numbers tends to be the failure to price carbon.
Yeah, got you. Okay.
Shall we talk about the academic paper we all read, which was, as Frankie says, one of a number of outputs from the 15-odd stakeholder groups that were convened.
It's a real curate's egg.
Well,
but people will disagree about which parts are the good parts.
Well, I kind of got the impression that anybody that was anybody got the opportunity to get their pet idea into this document. And there's a few of them.
I feel like there was a little more trading off than that, because there are two bits that are relative. Well, maybe there's more. There's two bits that feel relatively pure yet highly opposed to each other, and we've encountered protagonists in these battles before. The carbon pricing section is like a very straight down the line, like carbon prices are good, let's do them well, here's some things for doing them well.
Yeah.
Of a sort that is like a red rag to the bull of carbon prices suck, it's all a neoliberal delusion, you need to something crush fossil investors line, which we spoke about some episodes back in the book club episode on the Jessica Green book. And there's a very Jessica Greeny chapter or page in this report that's like investor-state dispute settlement. That's got to go. That's the big thing to do. And maybe people agreed, well, you can have your carbon price bit if I get my ISDS bit.
But that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
But
there's you had to trade. You couldn't just come along and say, I've got a acronym that's bad. Let's say it's bad.
Well, maybe we should say
had to agree non-aggression on some other pet topics.
Sure, and maybe that's the case, and we should say that some Australian luminaries, including Professor Frank Yotzo from ANU, played a significant role in the curation, compilation, editing of this document. So perhaps we can bail Frank up at some point and get the inside juice on the horse trading that went into this document. But there are a lot of classic ideas that get a run around the track. Hobby horses whinnying whimsily in the distance.
I did notice with glancing reference to Frank's involvement in this that border carbon adjustment in that phrasing.
Very positive.
That's the one true nomenclature.
In that phrasing appears just one step short of the BOCA acronym that we're all chomping at the bit for, which seemed to suggest maybe Frank's particular hobby was caught up in that sense. But I'm agreeing that some of these things, I don't think you could call them like a complete kind of cross purposes or anything, but it does feel like, it's the kind of best kind of negotiated collection of broadly sensible ideas. Let's just rather than talking around them, let's kind of go through a few of them. So it's a helpful summary up front, which organises them by those three thematic pillars that we touched on earlier. So under the first, overcoming economic dependence, there's kind of the first one, which, you could kind of broadly stop there if you needed to. It's like the all-encompassing holistic government plans to transition away from fossil fuels and dismantle legal, financial and political barriers resulting from fossil fuel lock-in and retrenchment. So really kind of calling for, I guess it's like the evolution or kind of addition to things that we've got in sectoral decarbonisation plans for countries that have that, right? You could make an argument that something along those lines, specifically looking at fossil fuel phase outs, might suit that purpose.
and it would be transformative and definitive, just like Australia's sector plans.
I'm not.
Have been.
I think we have ventured plenty of comments articulating our views on that front.
Well, those were all behind the paywall.
Oh, that's right. Wink, wink,
For
nudge,
any
nudge.
Summerupperers on the line who are not yet super, we did consistently identify some gaps and limitations in those sector plans in Australia.
I can insert a little advertisement here, actually, because I was tooling around on the Patreon a few weeks ago, and I've actually made a collection of the sector plan episodes. So if you're allergic to subscriptions, dear listener, you can just go buy access to the 6 sector plan episodes. Give yourself a treat.
Pay to play.
I did not notice you'd done that, Luke, but there you go. Well, that's my extortion KPI ticked off for tonight. Thanks, Menzel. The next one is super interesting and doesn't get as much focus, I think, in conversations like these, and it goes to the workforce piece of this, which is huge. So it's really nice to see this called out prominently, and they really talk about the imperative to work with workers on early retraining and skills development, as well as community and regional development, sharing economic benefits and costs of the transition, ensuring they're distributed fairly. So I thought it was great to see that called out so prominently early on in the piece. The next one, again, could just apply across so many different things, but I really liked the trolling of carbon capture and storage here in particular, which was the need to communicate fair, transparent and evidence-based policies. So the call out here is that, the public generally supports climate action, and they're really kind of railing against misinformation and disinformation, and so specifically identifying false narratives around, the viability and effectiveness of fossil CCS. And I think making also a bold play for banning fossil fuel advertising and lobbying as well. What did you guys make of that one?
I didn't like this one. I feel like in a lot of these recommended areas for action, there's a bunch of more sensible things or middle of the road things, or things that can be interpreted in a middle of the road way. And there's some things that are off-puttingly overstated, or whoa, how would that work to them? And this was one of the ones that gave me the biggest woe, because I think that efforts at regulating misinformation have done quite poorly in the last few years, and we've also seen just how destructive a government not of goodwill on climate issues can be when it starts enforcing its political view of what good information is in a really harsh way. I don't think the Trump administration in the United States needed in any way the license of previous efforts to sweep bad information off the internet, but they are using every legal tool at their disposal, and some ones that seem like they're not legal as well, to enforce their narrative. And I just don't think we want to give encouragement to the approach of saying, I don't agree with your judgments, therefore you are forbidden from expressing them, which is definitely going to be how some of the people, like the list of false solutions, can get quite expansive, not in this document, but a lot of things are ready to be put in the false solutions bucket by somebody. Very few of those people are ever going to have significant political power, but I felt really leery of some of this. But of course I would say that because in my day job, I would count as a lobbyist to be banned.
So,
We need to silence you, Tennant.
I've gone on enough.
you're viewing this as the silence tea read recommendation.
I could probably do with some silencing, says the long-suffering listener.
I don't know that I would ever categorise myself as like a big government type proponent. But I'm going to disagree with you a little here, Reed. Like, I might quibble. This is clearly a hobby horse of some in the group here. And, as you get with academic summaries where you see specific things called out that are, very particular to academic settings, i.e. wanting to, they sort of call out fossil fuel industry influence in educational, cultural and community settings in particular. So, but all of that said, I think you could very easily make a case, which has been made, they draw the comparison to tobacco style ad campaigns where we can definitely establish the case that fossil fuels are harmful to human health. On that basis, you could regulate a restriction on the amount of advertising or political interference. That's going spectacularly well in Australia with the gambling industry here at the moment. I didn't know if you noticed that.
We can all draw inspiration.
That's right. How to not get shit done. But I don't think it makes the analogy any less valid. Why isn't that a feature of discussion here? I mean, I know why it isn't, but I don't think it's wrong to call that out, is all. And just to take the current case in point with the sort of national debate around a gas export tax and the fact that that's not happening in this budget. Does anyone seriously believe that there hasn't been a very concerted and well-resourced advocacy campaign by that industry to fight that off this time around? It's not a level playing field when it comes to this stuff. And so where you've got different constituencies, including First Nations people, minority groups that are nowhere near as well resourced, but have just as important a perspective and need to be heard in these debates, find themselves out-resourced and outdone by industries that have continued to profit handsomely from the resources that belong to all of us. So anyway, look, I have strong personal feelings on this one. I didn't disagree with, I guess, the central point being made here. And I'm kind of wondering why it hasn't featured a bit more prominently in the discourse up till now.
The Climate Thought Police, headed up by Sergeant Muscovich.
I mean, okay. So,
sounding like you're on Team Lobbyist.
I look at this stuff and you go, oh, that's kind of wild. That's really wild. No, I actually think this is the direction of travel and where things are heading. If you think about global frameworks that kind of call up best practice when it comes to corporate sustainability disclosures, you're starting to see more of an emphasis in disclosures like that and an onus being put on companies to disclose and explain their advocacy and lobbying activities. And that is to draw kind of more attention and transparency to the way that different actors in the system are leveraging their positions or influence. So I don't know. Maybe one reading of this is rather extreme and it'll never happen. But I actually think this is maybe in 10 years' time. This I hope could be a more present feature of the the discussion.
Well, so I want to gracelessly dismount from my controversial position by assuming an even more controversial position, which is I think that a problem with this academic summary of positions put and of the broader inputs to the whole summit is that I don't think it gives enough credence to the things that people value about fossil fuels and therefore doesn't give enough emphasis to actually meeting them where they're at and meeting concerns that they've got, because there are some important differences between fossil fuels and tobacco in that almost the entirety of our current civilization is built on fossil fuels. And if they were to just disappear tomorrow, and of course, everybody will always say we're not talking about stopping things overnight, but like we are currently experiencing a decline in fossil fuel supply as a global disaster. Yes, there is a silver lining of the greater prompt that it is giving those with the means to respond, to electrify, to pursue alternatives. But it is, at this point in time, a disaster to not have enough fossil fuels. And so, yes, the health impacts are real, and that's the next cab off the rank in this. The climate impacts are extremely real. The local impacts of bad extraction practices are real. Like all kinds of variously annoying to horrible side effects are very real. The core value proposition of the power to do stuff is also very real, and the fear of not having enough is quite potent. I really hope that this whole the conference coming at this time and in the context of this fossil fuel insecurity crisis could really, really be the basis for making that you get really valuable things from this now, and here's how. But all these damages come with it, and risks and instability come with it, and here is how what you want and need can be delivered without fossil fuels or with vastly less use of fossil fuels. Like that feels like a version of a message that more people could go, oh yeah. But at times all this comes dangerously close to saying if you didn't have it, you'd love it. That does not seem to be the lived experience of many people. Says non-driving interurbanite latte sipper me.
I think you missed shiny-ass Linker from the big...
Of course. Ever shinier.
I think, but like Tennant, I mean, I think like academics have a role in the system.
That's the most controversial thing you've said all night.
Pro-academic extremism. I can't believe what I'm hearing here.
I've outed myself.
Some of my best friends are academics.
There, I said it. I think your comments are better directed at the policymaker cohort of contributors and not the purist academics who have the right to express their view of the world, just like everyone else, I guess.
Well, until the thought police come for them.
That's right.
Yeah. I was also uncomfortable with this section for similar reasons to Tennant, but perhaps slightly differently.
More respectable reasons.
Well, I don't know. I think that efforts to counter misinformation are entirely appropriate. You've got to be careful because this is an incredibly polarised topic, and you run the risk of a big chunk of the community who already feel disenfranchised and think this is a complete crock, feeling that their views are being silenced. And in terms of building the kind of the constituency we need to navigate what is likely to be a pretty bumpy 10, 15 20 years of transition, people on one side of politics feeling super grumpy and disenfranchised is not how we get there. I think you've just got to do the hard work, building that literacy, sort of demonstrating the benefits, actually getting out into communities and having those conversations. I don't know that banning stuff is necessarily going to get you there. So that was my hesitation. I think in terms of the Pollyanna of it all, it's interesting that this is coming through an academic lens, because when I read academic papers, the best academic papers are really alive to the complexity of some of these challenges and are really upfront about them. There is actually a lot of that in this document. It's a little bit boostery. Secure the energy transition with these 12 simple actions. And we know it's more complicated than that. There's a section a little bit further down on harmonised fossil fuel supply levies to incentivise demand shifts and fund just transitions, talking about and they acknowledge the really significant fiscal risks that are faced by very fossil fuel dependent jurisdictions if we really got serious about this transition. But then they immediately, devoted a sentence to that, segue to another sentence, which is like, the transition offers substantial rewards. Clean energy investment now is nearly double fossil fuel spending, creating millions of new jobs. That could be true, but where are the jobs? Is that relevant to the nations and the jurisdictions that are having the stool kicked out from under them? There's a lot of complexity under the hood, and I would have liked to see some more of that foregrounded in this document. Hard to do. It's a summary. It's literally 16 pages. There's a lot of ideas canvassed, but for a policymaker saying, okay, I want to do something on these levies, how does one actually operationalise this? And I guess my sense is that there's a commitment to do some of that work in between the conferences as well. If the ideas that are foregrounded in this first event kind of act as the spark and the inspiration to kind of pick some of the best ones and continue that effort in between sessions, that would all be to the good.
I did feel like the coordinated minimum fossil fuel supply levies idea is one that could actually be a really constructive conversation among nations. It's clearly a dynamic. The fear of losing investment and relative position by taxing gas producers too highly is clearly a highly potent fear for some countries. Not all that many of them, apparently. It seems like it's us in the United States that really, really go light on the oil and gas companies. That could be really constructive. Although I am now suddenly wondering, is there place for researching the idea of massive tax cuts for oil and gas companies as a strategy to ensure that nations have so little feeling of benefit or having anything at stake that they're happy to close them down because they're just getting away with murder? Could that be a way to baffle people into transition? Maybe not.
I did just find it funny as you were saying that. One of the things that was actually kind of missing from this summary was the common refrain of more research needed on some of this, which was funny.
There's no tower ivory enough for some of my zanier ideas for more research.
No. Well, we've kind of gone down a rabbit hole on a couple of these, but we've not even touched on some of the other things mentioned across the board. And it's not often that we're kind of on vastly different viewpoints on particular things, but I am quite surprised at how much you guys objected to that idea, because I just completely disagree with you both on that. But
and if the Let Me Sew Up podcast turns up next fortnight with Ted and I both have, having been cancelled, it's turned into the Frankie Muscovich hour.
We'll wait and see what the listeners think, the ultimate verdict. But we should touch on some of the other things. Like, I mean, Tennant, you just touched on the fossil fuel supply levies, but under that pillar of transforming supply and demand, there were quite a few ideas in there. The first one kind of does the no regrets piece on, immediate measures to prevent future emissions, so banning new fossil fuel infrastructure, mandating legally binding cuts to methane emissions in the energy sector, which feels like there's going to be increasing discussion about that, as well as the piece on accelerating electrification of end users. And then we go through some of the more classic things around carbon pricing, which is kind of a very straight bat compared to some of the other things, like just very innocuous. Also looking at enabling standards and monitoring requirements for fossil fuel transition targets, levies, and then also the piece on central banks' financial and price stability mandates to reduce financing costs for clean energy, electrification, and enabling infrastructure. So, common sense and sort of predictable stuff there. I feel like maybe the other things worth touching on sort of fell in that last category of asks, unless none of that was particularly controversial or jumped out as being something I was very surprised to see brought up.
There were some hard bits in there, or again, bits that could be more controversial than others. But I also thought that the calls around evolving the reporting on and categorization of fossil fuel reserves and resources to more clearly include the sort of lifetime and transition-related limits on them, and the costs that were being stored up for closure and remediation. I thought that was really interesting. Would love to hear more about that in future. The thing that I thought was missing is I thought this whole thing needed a good dose of abundance thought.
Yep.
On the doing of things. Yeah. Because there's a lot of proceduralism in here, more in the first section than this middle one. But there's an awful lot of, if you maximise consultation and you put procedural justice at the heart of everything, then you've solved it. And a lot of, yes, but how do things actually get done would be a valuable perspective to have in here. And there are academics who think about how to get things done, but they didn't organise themselves well enough to demand their page.
That's right. Not enough to influence this particular paper. I did, though, because I'm a methane sicko, did like the calling out of a focus on methane, like that they wanted to see that targeted particularly with a pledge to cut methane specifically. And I think in looking at the detail of what they're calling for there, apart from having legislated targets directed at methane reduction, they also were kind of bullish on expanding the EU methane regulation to other major gas importing countries, so sort of forming a gas buyers club, if you like. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I'm sure we're going to hear more about this kind of thing, especially if Muscovich's methane musings continues, and I predict it will into the future.
You have considerable betting market influencing ability to bring about that outcome.
I put some money down on some great odds before we started recording. Or maybe just to round us out, the last kind of pillar went to the piece on advancing international cooperation and climate diplomacy. And so, there's only 3 things in here, but all kind of quite different focuses within each of them. One was, I guess, more of a kind of governance-y focused one on basically just strengthening international cooperation within and outside the UNFCCC. And they highlighted the possible adoption of, that sort of dedicated international legal instrument on fossil fuel supply, which I need to go look at the detail of again. But this is the treaty. Yep. But this is also the section that calls on the neutralisation of the investor-state dispute settlement process as well. So it's interesting to see that really come through strongly in this document.
And there was an ISDS action brought against Colombia during the conference by an oil company, I believe, that they had a dispute with. A bunch of people seem to hate ISDS. We discussed it again in book club. That a bit. Feel like I will restate my objection from book club on this, which is that energy transition is going to require a lot of international capital into many countries to support growth in clean energy and lowering the risk environment for those investments is a good thing. You can definitely screw up the provision of that low risk environment and tie governments' hands in ways that will ultimately be destructive. But hashtag not all investor protections are bad. That's one's going to catch on.
There's a T-shirt. As always, we close out the show with one more thing in which we all share something that is currently captivating our attention. Frankie, what have you got?
I had so many different things I wanted to mention in this segment, but...
You've got to pick one.
Oh, do I have to, though?
No.
All right.
Frankie's choice.
No. Well... You just alerted me to the release today of the IEA's global methane tracker, in which...
Oh, hang on. Is this Moskovich's methane musings? Tennant, you got to sing the song.
Oh, please, 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 please. Please, sir. I want my song.
Well, it didn't get a run last time.
It did not.
Let's see if I can do a better job this time.
That just tells me that you guys don't listen to the end of the episode.
I did. I didn't hear it.
Oh, no, you listened to the draft.
To the draft.
I didn't listen to the final shit because I did listen to the end for the show notes.
And then I just deflated a little bit. Hello, my methane. Hello, my LNG. Hello, my fugitive gas. Don't use olfactors prior. Baby, our world's on fire. If you keep leaking and don't start peaking, then you'll wreck our one home. So, baby, electrify, and gas will be on its own.
Thanks, Tennant. It's just so perfect.
It's really a little long for a jingle.
Yeah, you probably need to just have a pithier version for when I ask you this.
I'll work on it.
Give us the 10-second version, would you? I love it so much. Thank you for that sweet rendition, Tennant. And even though I don't know what's in this report, I'm going to go look at it, I guess. 'Cause
maybe you can muse about what might be in there.
Well, I'm just going off.
I'm
just going off what Tennant said. Where not in the song. You do. I picked the wrong one more thing.
So this is really a story about how you had a conversation with Tennant about this great report.
Yes. You only mentioned it to me literally before we started recording, and I've been frantically scrolling through it to see what it says about Australia.
Tennant, would you like to intervene in Frankie's one more thing?
No, I'm quite enjoying this.
He's not going to save me.
Well, look, what I heard, I heard it has some satellite-based estimates of Australia's methane emissions from fossil extraction that are rather higher than the current estimates that what we submit to the UN. And this will occasion some discussion, is my prediction, possibly on this here show.
I definitely think we're queuing this up for a future episode. I've just done word searches for Australia through this document, and I'm not landing on the desired content.
This is such compelling audio.
Well, you forced me to pick one when I wasn't ready, so this is what you get. Nonetheless, it was worth it. It was worth it to get Tennant singing, so let's move on.
Tennant, what have you got?
I want to draw listeners' attention to the fact that the International Maritime Organization had another meeting recently, not of the whole body of the IMO making great big decisions, but the working session of its environmental committee going on about how to resolve the impasse over the global shipping carbon tax that was all set to pass last year and then got poleaxed by vigorous US diplomacy. And the vigorous US diplomacy continued at this session with, very hilariously, US diplomats going around passing out documents with estimates of, shock and horror, the increased costs in shipping that they asserted would be experienced by the world, a world otherwise innocent of any increased costs to shipping from anything that the US might have done lately.
I, for one, am glad that the US has put at the heart of its foreign and diplomatic policy, keeping shipping costs down around the world.
Yep, that's their watchword. And mission accomplished. So anyway, there was a bunch of discussion. There were petrostates galore, including the US, saying some version of let's junk this whole thing and move on. There were countries like Japan saying, well, let's go ahead, but maybe with slightly less ambitious or somewhat less ambitious targets. There still seems to be a large number, a majority of IMO member states who are keen to go ahead with the carbon price on shipping and are keen to iron out details of how the revenues will be applied to make transition easier. And cutting out some demand for heavy fuel oil seems like a good idea. Having some supply chains involved that are distinct for shipping supplies seems like a good idea. I think things will probably remain very fraught at the next big meeting in October. But this is an idea that is at least not dead, and maybe its time has come.
All right. Long-time listeners might recall that the crisis is not the only thing going on in climate and energy land this year. There's a little thing called COP31. And Australia's involved as the president of negotiations, and there was a milestone on the journey to Antalya. Just this last week, there was an IEA high-level dialogue with Turkey and Australia in Paris, at which the IEA was announced as a strategic partner. And given this podcast's interest in electrification, there was some encouraging comments with President-Designate Karum noting that one of the things that they would be working on with the IEA was looking into pathways for the electrification of industry. Minister Bowen noting that the current global fuel crisis means that it's incredibly important that COP31 must be a clean energy and electrification accelerator and only strengthens the case for clean sovereign energy. Interesting word. Sovereign.
Sovereign energy.
Energy sovereignty now, perhaps, becoming the catch cry of the COP31 presidency.
I wonder if he's ordered his T-shirt yet.
So I thought that was a good thing. And IEA, obviously, an important partner in terms of providing the evidence base for some of these initiatives. Certainly makes me hopeful that we'll see electrification featuring pretty prominently in the action agenda for COP31 when it emerges. All right, that is almost our show for today. But every fortnight, after the show, we record a bonus episode called There Is Too Much, in which we grab a drink, put up our feet and cover something we didn't have time for on the main show. Tennant, what are we covering on the bonus episode this week?
What could there possibly be too much of? Money! The federal budget, 2026-27, no doubt, rolling in lucre. A good news story from start to finish. We will be breaking down what we think may be in it and the circumstances in which it is being handed down. Budget fever sweeps the BOCO.
Well, if you want to catch budget fever.
And who wouldn't?
Run, don't walk to letmesumup.net. Click support LMSU, and for the low price of $10 a month or $100 a year, you too can access that sweet BOCO. That is our show for today. This podcast was edited by energy professional and podcast tragic Mark Spencer from Here Media Studio. Frankie, in your role as Global VP for Marketing Extortion, you like promoting stuff. It sounds like your enthusiasm for extortion has increased over the course of the episode. What would you like to extort today?
It has. I want to foreshadow, and we haven't talked about this in terms of raising it on the podcast, but I'd like to extort some of our long-time listeners to send us some audio notes. I think we're coming up. This will be our 98th episode. Is that right?
We are in our 98th episode right now.
Woohoo! So in just a few weeks' time, we'll be recording our 100th episode, and I think what we are keen on is hearing from all of you with questions, with maybe even like little stories about, I don't know, like your favorite one of these episodes or something that you have remembered in your listening time. Even telling us, actually, I love hearing this, what you're doing when you listen to LMSU. I love hearing about people telling us that they listen to us while they're doing their weekly shop or doing some gardening.
So questions and LMSU-related anecdotes is what you're calling for.
I've just decided to inject that in. Basically, we just want to hear from you because we want to hopefully use some of that in our 100th episode. So
I'm all here for the anecdotes. I would love to hear about the special place that this little pod has found in people's lives. But I would like to encourage our listeners to also send us questions, because the premise of this episode is ask me anything.
Yes.
We do need the questions as well.
Yes. Well, I figured we got one more episode to create more of a runway on that. But in the meantime, come on.
Don't just ask us anything. Tell us anything.
That's right.
Maybe not anything.
Okay, I'll put it to you.
AMA, not TMI.
Has the lack of a question ever stopped us from banging on for too long? No, it hasn't. So,
timer in front of me says correct.
That's right. I rest my case.
Yes. So if you have questions or anecdotes or anything else that you want to send to us in a voice note, you could be included in our 100th episode if you get it in sharpish. You can head to, again, letmesumup.net, and there is a voice note tab at the top of the page, and you can send us your audio message. Get onto it now. But for now, for Frankie Muskovich and Lieutenant Reed, I'm Luke Menzel. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.